Morning, Trainiacs. If you've tried to buy a bike in 2020 or 2021, you know that stock is really limited. So being able to access some of the bikes that are in stock and understanding which ones are actually good bikes has become a major problem. Specifically with Canyon, they haven't been immune to the worldwide shortage of bicycle parts, but something that they do have a lot of is the older original model of the Canyon Triathlon SpeedMax bike. Now, a lot of people have started asking me, how does that compare to the new model of the Canyon SpeedMax? Canyon themselves have noticed that they have a huge amount of stock in the older model of the Canyon SpeedMax because a lot of people just think that because there's a newer model out, that the old model is inferior. So they ended up sending me a couple of bikes here to try out, because they feel that this bike is still a really good bike and people need to know that. I've spent the last couple of days testing each of these in really similar situations to see if there is a major difference, because if you are thinking about saving a little bit of money and actually getting access to a bike that is easily available, wondering if it is still a good bike going with the older model, or should you hold off, wait for the newer model? Fortunately, I'm here to tell you that there is no wrong decision. The first thing that I want to discuss, because it's what a lot of the bike companies talk about, is the speed. Every new model, the bike companies come out and say, well, the new model saves X watts. So what I did was I went and I put the same rally pedals from Garmin onto these bikes. I calibrated them before I went out for each ride so that the power that I was getting was accurate. I went out and did the exact same ride, trying to hit basically the exact same power and doing the intervals at the exact same places. Looking at my Garmin Connect data here, the first ride that I did was on the old model of the Canyon SpeedMax. And you can see that my average moving speed was 30.1 kilometers per hour. For the Americans out there, this is roughly around 18.3 miles per hour. It's just a cruisy ride. I didn't want it to be all about high power. My normalized power for this was 152 watts. So remember, at 152 watt average, I'm roughly around 30.1 kilometer per hour average speed. Then, going over to the second ride that I did on the newer model, what I ended up pulling off was an average moving time of 29.1 kilometers per hour. A little bit slower, and an normalized power of 159 watts. So you might be saying, holy smokes, well, the bike actually got slower. I would 100% say that that's not the case. Engineers at Canyon know that the very best thing that they can do from a marketing standpoint at Canyon is they make bikes that are faster than the previous model. If they make a bike that's slower and all of a sudden all their pro athletes aren't winning races, a lot of people are going to start questioning if the bikes are actually as fast as they were. Now, I've actually heard murmurs online of some people saying, well, this new bike is actually slower. I think I have a reason why that is, and I think it's actually potentially a good thing. Take a look at how low the base bar is on the older Canyon model versus how much higher it is on the new Canyon model. So we're talking like 3-4 inches actually lower for the base bar. Now, when I was out doing my ride, because it's just a casual ride, I'm spending probably about 90-95% of my time in the base bar here. On the new model of Canyon, because I'm up 3 or 4 inches, my entire frontal plane, the aerodynamic drag that I have to push through the air, is that 3 or 4 inches larger. So I'm going to be that much less aerodynamic. What I ended up finding though, is that this lower base bar was actually a lot less comfortable because it's so much lower, so much more of my upper body weight was on this base bar. So my hands ended up getting numb, my arms got numb, my upper body got tired. Whereas on here, it was a lot more like a road bike. It was a lot more comfortable. Now, when I went into the aero position and I got into that time trial position that I'd be racing in both bikes, this bike actually, in my opinion, felt a little bit faster and easier to put out power. So I think that difference in speed between the two rides is really just a difference in position, because that difference in speed essentially went away when I ended up going from one bike to the next in the tri position. And that is actually a major point of difference between the old model and the new model. With the old model, the tri position that you can get to into that cockpit area is really quite limited. The elbow pads don't really have a ton of adjustability. The aero bars don't have a ton of adjustability. So in a lot of cases, people were having to buy aftermarket cockpits for the old SpeedMax. With the new SpeedMax, that's some of the new engineering that they've done, is they have built in massive amounts of adjustability into the new SpeedMax. I think that that difference in understanding how people end up building up bikes practically is what has changed between the old and the new model. Triathlon bikes of this older era, the one model ago kind of era, they were very, very fast, but a lot of the integrations were a little bit janky. They were hard to work on. People ended up having to buy parts aftermarket to make them work for their unique situations. I think this era, and why I said that I think this new model of SpeedMax actually changes the game a fair bit, is because people aren't forced to make those compromises where they buy a bike and then all of a sudden still have a ton of work to do to set it up to be as aero as possible, to have all the storage that they need, to have all the hydration and nutrition storage that they need. Now, does that mean that you should definitely get the new SpeedMax over the old SpeedMax? No, what I would say is if you want to save a little bit of money, you can get a better build quality old SpeedMax for $1,000 less than this new SpeedMax. So this exact build that I've got here, the SpeedMax CF8 disc ETAP, $6,500 US. This exact build that I've got over here, SpeedMax CF SLX, that's a better frame quality. SL, that is $5,500. So you're gonna save $1,000. And then if you want to add on all of that customization into the cockpit after, you can get a Sync Ergonomics build kit for $360 Australian, which right now works out to about 270 additional US dollars. So your net saving roughly around $730 while still getting a bike that is technically a higher build quality. In addition to that, with the older model SpeedMax, you get the integrated hydration system up at the front of the bike. You don't get that integrated hydration system at the front of this bike. You get that when you start going up into the super duper high-end models of the SpeedMax, which essentially this is. That said, that hydration system over here in the older model SpeedMax is one of the areas where I see there's a little bit of kind of engineering jankiness that you have to work around. The way that the Di2 cables are routed through this older model SpeedMax can actually lead to pinching those Di2 cables when you end up putting this hydration system together. And if you've ever pinched a Di2 cable and had to buy a single replacement Di2 cable, you know that they can cost up to about $80. So like I say, you are still getting a really good bike. It's just some of the engineering and the way that things are thought through a lot better with newer models. Related to that, the integration for your nutrition with the bento box, you give up a little bit with that older model. In the older model, it's that rubberized bento box that you have to rip your fingers apart to jam your fingers in there, and it's hard to actually access what's in there. In the newer model, it's just a flap that you flip up and you have constant access to it without ripping up your fingers. Related to that, the storage for the flat repair kit in the older model is integrated into the bike, which you might think, all right, well, you know what, that's actually quite nice because I've got instant access to the flat repair kit there, whereas in the newer model, you actually have to flip up the bento box in here and then it's in the bottom underneath a whole bunch of nutrition. And you might be thinking, oh, that's not ideal. I'd agree with you, but 99% of the time you're using these bikes in training, not in racing where you have a ton of nutrition in there. And that flat repair section in the older model SpeedMax actually gets in the way of taking your water bottles out, which you're going to do 50, 60 times throughout a ride, and it's constantly bumping into the frame here. Newer model SpeedMax, there's all the room because that frame isn't tapered off with that big bevel here that's taking up a bunch of space and making it difficult to actually get those bottles in and out. Another fairly significant difference, as I mentioned, the older SpeedMax has a Di2 build spec. The newer SpeedMax, you have access to the SRAM Force and SRAM access the ETAP system. I really prefer that system to the point that in my contract with Canyon, we specifically talked about, do I want Shimano or SRAM? And because I travel so much, I want as few wires as possible so there are as few failure points as possible. Is that worth the additional $1,000 to you if you're not traveling a ton? Most people probably don't care, and Di2 is what's commonly used for electronic shifting. Now, some people might say that the major difference between these two bikes is the braking system. On the old SpeedMax, it's traditional caliper brakes. On the new SpeedMax, it's disc brakes. Now, I actually look at this as a complete non-factor when it comes to deciding which bike you want. It's actually kind of questionable if it is a performance benefit to have disc brakes versus caliper brakes. If anything, it's probably an aerodynamic penalty. It's a braking quality benefit to have disc brakes. But really, how much do you brake in a triathlon? A lot of industry bike people that I've talked to actually say that this real push towards disc brakes on triathlon bikes is completely consumer driven, not actually performance driven. It's just everyone saying, oh, disc brakes are the way of the future, it's the way they have to be, so we have to put disc brakes on a bike. Whereas the bike people are like, well, triathletes aren't great at mechanical issues. They're often traveling, and if there's something that's going to go wrong, it's more often going to go wrong on a disc brake bike than a caliper bike. A caliper bike, much easier to work on, more robust. So I would actually say that that shouldn't be a deciding factor. The build quality in the frame seems about similar. I did some stand-up sprints to try to surge up to high power to feel how the bike responded, if that power transfer from the pedals went into the bike or if it was more or less noodly on one or the other. I really didn't notice any sort of difference. They both handle like a triathlon bike, which is like a hog. It takes a long time to get up to speed. Beyond that, between the two bikes, they're both triathlon bikes. Now, if you want to save some money on an older SpeedMax, I don't think that you are going to experience much of a performance detriment. If you want the newest of the new, I think that you're going to get a much more practical bike, an easier to work on bike, a bike that suits you a little bit better right out of the box. But if you want to spend a little bit of time and maybe about $300, you can get a lot of that with the older SpeedMax. So while I do agree that the new SpeedMax is a refinement on a really good bike, and it is a better bike, the old bike is still a great bike. And some of those tiny little experiential benefits that you get with the new bike aren't that important to you, then by all means, go and grab an older SpeedMax, save some money, get yourself a great bike, and maybe save that money for a really nice helmet, or heck, even a membership at app.mymotive.com where you can get all of your training for your races for $57 a month after a 14-day free trial to see if you even want it. Either way, Trainiacs, you're gonna get a really good bike. It just depends what's more important to you, having the newest of the new or saving a little bit of money while still getting a really good bike. In either case, you're making a great decision. I'm a big fan of Canyon. I think as far as entry-level bikes go and getting people onto a triathlon bike, there is really no other bike that has as good a feature set at the price point that you're able to access it because of their direct-to-consumer model. If you aren't already subscribed, hit the subscribe button below and go check out the training app at app.mymotive.com. Later, Trainiacs.